Thank you, Gillian. Good morning, everybody. So as you've heard, today in our service, we're looking at how God cares for his creation and how as his followers and followers of Jesus is part of our ministry and part of our mission to care for his creation too. And I mean, very, very hard act to follow, right? Monica, Emily, Jake, amazing. Round of applause for them. Weren't they fantastic? And these guys, they wrote the whole thing themselves, planned it all themselves, and they've been lobbying us for weeks saying, we really want to come and do this. And they were incredible, I think. So well done, you guys. Really, really, really brilliant, really brilliant. So we're going to have a bit of time this morning to just explore a bit more about what God says about caring for his creation. It's a nice time of the year to do this because it's the spring. I hope you've all been enjoying the spring, the sunshine, the flowers coming out. We've been on some lovely walks this week. And we've got a great passage this morning that looks at God's creation and the beauty of his creation. And Scala and Alina are going to come up and read for us. Would you like to come up, girls? Thank you. And as they read this passage, I really love you to really listen, really concentrate. Maybe close your eyes, or that's a bit risky, but just listen and hear all of God's creation and nature and the beauty of all of that comes through this passage. Do you want to start, Scarlett?
You make springs pour water into the ravines, so streams gush down from the mountains. They provide water for all the animals, and the wild donkeys quench their thirst. The birds nest beside the streams and sing among the branches of the trees. You send rain on the mountains from your heavenly home, and you fill the earth with the fruit of your labor. You cause grass to grow for the livestock and plants for people to use. You allow them to produce food for the earth, wine to make them glad, olive oil to soothe their skin, and bread to give them strength. The trees of the Lord are well cared for, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted. There the birds make their nests, and the storks make their homes in the cypresses. High in the mountains live the wild goats, and the rocks form a refuge of the hyraxes.
I'm going to read Psalms chapter 104, verses 19 to 28. You made the moon to mark the seasons, and the sun knows when to set. You send the darkness, and it becomes night, when all the forest animals prowl about. Then the young lions roar for their prey, stalking the food provided by God. At dawn they slink back into their dens to rest. Then people go off to their work, where they labor until evening. O Lord, what a variety of things you have made. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here is the ocean, vast and wide, teeming with life of every kind, both large and small. See the ships sailing along, and Leviathan, which you made to play in the sea. They all depend on you to give them food as they need it. When you supply it, they gather it. You open your hand to feed them, and they are richly satisfied.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, girls. Well done. Really amazing, clear speaking, fantastic. So amazing passage, and in that we hear sort of the joy of God's creation, his beauty. Did you hear about the rain and the rivers and the birds and the lions and the donkeys and the trees and the sun and the animals and the grass and the cattle, all of that. So this is where you now get to find out what your piece of paper is for. So we've been hearing about how God is a wonderful creative God that created this beautiful world. And in Genesis 1:31, it says, when God had created everything, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And we are made in his image, so we're made to be creators as well. So today, I'd like you all to draw a picture. While I'm talking, I'm going to talk for a few minutes. While I'm talking, you can draw a picture of something from God's creation. So take your inspiration from that passage. You could draw a tree, a flower, some fruit, a whale, some fish, a lion, cattle, mountains, the sun, the moon, anything you want from God's creation. It has to be something from God's creation. There's no art prizes here, so it doesn't have to be brilliant, so no pressure. But all just draw a picture while I'm talking. You have to concentrate as well, but you can draw a picture of something amazing from God's creation. Be creative, have fun with it. When we hear in that passage something of like you can hear the psalmist talking about the wonder and the joy of God's creation. And have you ever had that experience where, you stand on top of a mountain and you look out, or you go to a beautiful forest, or you're in a lovely garden, and your breath is just taken away and you think, oh, that's just amazing. And you have that sense of real amazement. Has anybody had that experience? Do you have that experience sometimes? Put your hands up if you've had that. Brilliant. So we had one of those. This was a recent one from ours. Can you put the photo up, please? This was us on holiday. We had the fortunate opportunity to go to Austria on holiday last year. We were traveled on the train through the mountains. This is near Innsbruck. And we walked up about half of that mountain and got the cable car up the other half. And then we were out at the top looking out over this incredible view of all the mountains and the valleys and the hills. And just, it really takes your breath away. You can really feel, wow, isn't that amazing? Like God's creation, that amazing creation out there. And that's the very same feeling that the sort of psalmist had when he was writing that passage. And in the book of Job, it talks about God's amazing creation as well, and in Genesis. So all that feeling that we have when we see something like that and think, wow, isn't that incredible? That's us responding to God's creation and us worshiping God with our hearts as we see something like that. So take a quick moment now. So turn to a neighbor next to you and say, think of something really, really beautiful that you've seen like that, a place or a walk you've been on, or a hill or a forest, or somewhere really beautiful that inspires you in God's creation. So just take a minute, turn to your neighbor, and talk about that. Okay, do you want to start coming back together? I hope that was helpful. You got inspired by your friends and neighbors and their inspirational place in creation. Might have given you some holiday ideas, Anyway, and we see in the Old Testament this amazing picture of God's wonderful, beautiful creation and how he cares for it. And we see that in the New Testament as well. So in Matthew 10, verse 29, Jesus says, he's talking about how much God cares for us. But in the context of that, he uses this example and says, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. So your Father even cares for the little birds and the sparrows." In another place, he talks about how even Solomon, the great king, and all his glory was not as beautiful as the flowers in the field. And he's saying, this is how God clothes the grass that's here one day and gone the next. How much more he cares for you. But he does care for the grass and the animals and the creatures that he has created. And in Genesis 2, verse 15, when God has created humanity and put them in the garden, he says, the Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it, And often that's called the very first commandment that you find from God to man in the Bible, is to take care of his creation. So caring for God's creation is part of our life as Christians, as part of our ministry, as part of our worship, as part of who we are and how we witness to the world. But how are we doing on that? And this is where it gets a little bit more depressing. So as you'll know from watching the TV and reading the screens, how we've done in obeying that command has not always been good. So just think back to that amazing passage of God's creation, of watering, and I just picked 3 things from that passage. I could have picked other things, but how are we doing on 3 of those things? So right at the beginning of that passage, we heard about God creating the rain and the fresh water that feeds the fields and provides for all the cattle and everything. Today, water stress is a massive issue around the world. There's just not enough fresh water going around. And the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, where this passage was set and written hundreds of years ago, the Middle East is now the world's most water-stressed region. 83% of the population are exposed to extremely high water stress. There's just not enough fresh water. It's projected to reach 100% of the population by 2050. 14 of the 17 most water-stressed countries are located there in the Middle East around that. So that beautiful picture of God's creation, but today, thanks to overuse, farming, population growth, cities, that water's under massive stress, that water that God created and provided in that passage. And then a second one, you saw in that passage, did you hear about the wild lions roaring? Did you hear that bit about the wild lions roaring out there in the wilderness all around Israel and Judah? Well, they're not there anymore. So those lions in that area of the world are now extinct. They're gone entirely. Those lions were hunted to extinction, and as agriculture and land spread, their wild lands evaporated and their prey evaporated. So those wild lions that we read about there in that amazing passage about God's creation in that part of the world, now extinct and gone. And at the end, we heard about how the ocean was teeming with God's creatures and beautiful, and the fish and all that stuff. It's not teeming anymore. So in just between 1970 and 2010, during the lifetime of many of us here, 52% of fish in the ocean have declined because of overfishing. So that beautiful picture of God's creation, and look at how we have trampled on it and not followed his instruction to us to follow and care for his creation. And just to give one example of this, many years ago I had the opportunity to travel to Brazil, which is sort of famous for the rainforest and the rivers and the lush animals and the biodiversity and so on. And then we were up in the northeast part of Brazil, which is part that's been really heavily deforested. And we traveled on this road that was kind of through a desert all day long. And I was chatting with the guys I was in the car with, and towards the end of the journey, one of the guys said, do you know what, when I was a kid, this journey, the whole day would have been in shade of trees, but now, 30, 40 years later, completely gone, and it's like a desert when it was a jungle. So we've not done a great job as God's followers in following and caring for his creation. But there is hope. We can turn that around. You've heard many great examples of things we can do in our own lives this morning at a micro scale. But at a macro scale, there's hope as well. So many of us remember, do you remember back in the 80s, we used to hear a lot about the hole in the ozone layer? Do you remember that? You remember that hole in the ozone layer? So that was, at that time, it was a major risk. So deodorant, CFC, and the sprays from what we used to use in fridges and freezers were causing this hole in the ozone layer, allowing solar radiation through, causing cancer. It's a massive, massive issue. So in 1987, there was the Montreal Protocol, where the nations of the world got together, banned those chemicals, and that hole in the ozone layer has now pretty much repaired itself. So that's been an amazing success of what can happen. And we could have been in an absolutely catastrophic position by now if that had not happened. But people came together and took action, and change happened. And in our rivers here in the UK, 100 years ago, our rivers would be an awful lot more polluted than they are today. You know, the fish and the natural wildlife in the rivers were really shocking then. There was so much pollution coming out of the factories and so on. And thanks to sort of environmental care and rules, a lot of that has replaced itself. And those rivers are much, much healthier than they were. And deforestation as well. We hear a lot about the trees being cut down, but actually it's now turned a corner. There's actually more trees being planted now than cut down. That's actually improving and getting better again. So things can change, and we read in the Bible how Jesus has come to restore all things, and that God will be restoring all things and bringing back his creation. He's not coming to whisk us off to somewhere else. He's coming to bring heaven back to earth and to restore it to the way it was always meant to be. So there is real hope in what can happen. Now, I hope you've all finished your pictures. So I have a couple of volunteers. So if Monica and Emily and Jake could collect the pictures, if you could pass your pictures to the ends of the rows, they're going to come around and collect. And if you could collect, and guys, if you can bring the pictures and put them up all around by the cross, at the bottom of the cross, that'd be great. That's it. Brilliant. Fantastic. If you collect all those pictures and then put them around by the cross, and we'll all have a look at them. I think everybody's pictures will be beautiful. They'll be beautiful. So while they're doing that, 3 quick thoughts to finish on. So we've heard how God created his world. He made it beautiful. He loves it. He cares for it. And he's instructed us to love and care for it. We've heard how so often we've messed that up, but how we still can get that right and we still can make a change. So I'm going to suggest 3 things that you can do today, 3 things we can all do. So firstly is to pray. As Christians, as God's followers, the first thing we always want to do is prayer. So we need to turn to God, repent of how we've messed up his creation, and pray for his creation. Secondly, we can think about giving, so financially supporting brilliant organizations that are caring for his creation. So there's one called Arosha that many of you may well have known of. It's a Christian organization that's all about caring for God's creation. And they're behind the Eco Church initiatives, and we're part of that Eco Church initiative. And you can get involved and support them. Look them up online. They're a brilliant organization to get behind. And then thirdly, there's lots of practical things we can all do in our lives. And you heard a lot about that earlier from Monica and Emily and Jake. So I won't repeat those again. But just little things we can do, like recycling, like making sure we switch to clean energy providers, like using a bit less meat, being careful the products we buy, and so on. And one of the ways we outwork our concern for all of this in our church is through that Arise group that Gillian mentioned earlier that's meeting on Tuesday. We meet here once a month as members of the church who are passionate about caring for God's creation, are passionate about justice and poverty and issues like that. We know those are issues really close to God's heart, and he wants us all to get involved and to be speaking that out, and that's part of our mission and our ministry as a church. And we know that when we do that, we're so relevant to people out there, and you've heard from the young people today how much they care about God's creation, how much they care about the environment, and as we as church are involved with those issues and speaking into them, we're relevant for young people, we're relevant for the kids of the future. So lots to hope for. Come and have a look afterwards at your brilliant pictures all around by the cross. Well done, everybody, for being here and being part today. And let's go out there and make sure we're living out God's calling to care for his creation as a church and as a family. Thank you.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever sing. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could